Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Seriously Arabic. Last session we learned about the status and the three form of status, which are Rafa, Nasab and Jar, and what each of these represents. So the Rafa is the doer, the Nasab is the detail about the fa'al, which is the verb, and we learned that Jar is the state that represents the word after of. So the word after of is majroor. We also learned how to tell status in Arabic, and you can tell by ending sounds and ending combinations. So ending combination, these are your ani, aini, aini, or your una, ina, ina, atun, atin, atin, and their correspondent light version. And then you have ending sounds, which are your un and in, and then u, a, i. So make sure you learn the chart and you understand how to recognize the i'rab as well as the halat of each word in Arabic, because we're starting off with an exercise today which will help us solidify that knowledge. So I'm going to be going through the answers, but you should definitely pause and do this yourself and then check with me whether you are able to do this. So replace the underlined words with the Arabic using the correct i'rab. So I'll show you with the first example what I mean by that. So you have the word al-mu'minu, which means believer, and you need to replace the word believer with the Arabic version, but you need to put it in the correct grammatical format. So what you need to do is have a look at if this believer word here is a doer, and if it is the case, then figure out the state for that one and figure out the number and the gender, but the gender doesn't matter too much here. So figure all of these things out and replace it with the correct word. So the believer prayed at the mosque. The believer is the doer of the action, which means it's going to be in the rafa state. It is also singular, so I'm going to be looking at the mufrad column. So it's going to be mu'minun, al-mu'minun. The believer prayed at the mosque. Number 2, he met the two believers. The two believers is nasab because he answers the question, who did the doer meet? So this is gonna be in the nasab row, and it's also gonna be in the dual row. So you're gonna have mu'minay. Wal mu'minayni. The thobe of the believers was white. This is the word after of, which means that the believer is gonna be majroor, and the word mu'min in the majroor state, that is plural, is gonna be mu'minina. Let's have a look at the amil one. So the workers were tired. The workers is the doer, so that's gonna be rafa, and this word is also plural, so it's gonna be amiluna. The car of the two workers was red. Again, this is the word after of, which means that the two workers is going to be majroor. So that's going to be amilaini. The believer hired a worker. Number 3. The believer is the doer, so that's going to be rafa, and you write it as al-mu'minu. Hired a worker. Hired what? A worker, which means the worker is going to be nasab, and it's only one worker. So this word is singular. So the singular nasab looks like this. Amilan. Nasih, which means advisor. So number 1 is the advisor of the believers left. So the advisor is the doer of the action. So this is rafa, and it's singular. So that's gonna mean that it's a nasihu. This word is going to be rafa, so we're going to say an-nasihu of the believers. This is again the word after of, which is going to be majroor, so it's going to be mu'minina. and it's going to be plural because believers is obviously plural. I met two advisors. Again, this is nasab because it answers the question who did he meet, and it is dual. So the dual nasab is going to be nasihaini. Advisors are sincere. So this is the subject. So this is going to be rafa, and you write it in Arabic as nasihuna because it's rafa and plural. Al-muallima, which means teacher, and this is a feminine word. So the teacher taught the two believers. The teacher is the doer of the action, so it's gonna be muallimatu. Taught the two believers. The two believers is in the nasab state, so you're gonna have mu'mi, ni, mu'minay, ni. I saw my teachers at the conference. I saw what? My teachers. So my teachers here is going to be plural, so it's going to be mu'mi, ni. So in this case, it's not mu'minina because it's mudaf, so it's going to be light. But it doesn't matter even if you say mu'minina or mu'mini, you'll be correct because you still manage to understand that it's that particular word. So the teachers like studying. So this is a feminine word. In the rafa state is gonna be al-muallimatu. So we're gonna move on to the next practice that I have prepared, which is to write down the properties of the following ism. So based on the table that we have learned, there are quite a few properties that we can figure out. I mean, there's 4 and we can figure out 3. So that is most of them for an ism. So we have the word alamina, which means world. So the status of this word, again, pause here to do it yourself. Alamina, the status of this word is either jar or it is nasab. The number is plural. Plural in Arabic means 3 or more, and the gender is masculine because it doesn't end with atun atin. So we know that the gender is masculine, and masculine in Arabic includes both females and males. But when you have a female, when you have feminine, it always includes only feminine, whereas masculine includes both. Okay, salihatun. This is in the rafa state. The number is plural and the gender is feminine. Muhsanataini. So again, this is feminine word, even though we haven't come across feminine. I'll mention it that this is a feminine word, and it ends with aini, which means that it is nasab or jar, and it is dual, and it is feminine. Mukhtalifuna. It ends with una, which means that this is in the rafa state, and it is plural, and it is masculine. Al-qanitatani. The status is rafa. This is dual, and it is a feminine word. We have muttaki'ina. The status is either nasab or jar, and it is plural, and it is masculine. Moving on to the theory section. Today we're going to be learning about light and heavy and what does it mean in the table. So by default, all ism are heavy, which means that when you see an ism that has a tanween or a noon of i'rab, they're all heavy. So in some instances, a word will be light. Okay? So by default, all ism are heavy, and in some instances they will be light. Now, what does it mean when a word is light? How do you make a word light? To make a word light, you remove the N sound by either removing the tanween or by removing the nun i'rab. So if you have the word muslimun, if you remove the tanween, you get the word muslimun. So the light version of muslimun is muslimun. As for removing the nun i'rab, if you have muslimuna, if you remove the nun i'rab, you get muslimu, which we have seen in the table already. And note here, when alif lam is added on a word, this removes the tanween but not the nun i'rabiyya. When you see this, whether a word is light or heavy is irrelevant. So when a word has alif lam, you don't need to ask yourself the question whether this word is light or heavy anymore, because it doesn't matter in that situation. Alif lam simply doesn't like tanween, but it does not make a word heavy and it doesn't make a word light necessarily. So when you have alif lam on a word, don't care about the fact it's light or heavy. But when an alif lam is on a word, make sure you do not have tanween on it, because alif lam doesn't like tanween, but she's totally cool with having a nun i'rabiyya. So there are 4 instances where a word will be light. So we've said that by default every word is heavy. So then when is a word light? So a word is light when it is a mudaf, and I have literally mentioned in the exercise. When it is al-munada, this is the word being called. So when you have the word, for example, when you have Oman, man will be light. La nafiyatu, lil jins, or easily said la nafi jins. This is the absolute categorical negation. It doesn't matter what these things are for now. All you need to learn is that there are 4 reasons, and that these are the reasons, and we are going to be learning these 4 instances in more detail later on. So know that there are 4 instances where word will be light, and that is when it is mudaf, when it is al-munada, la nafi jins, or ghair munsarif. Now we'll be doing an exercise in order to recognize words that are heavy or words that are light. So in this exercise, we're identifying whether the following words are light or heavy. So this is very easy. So just pause and complete this, and then I'm gonna go through the answers. So now we're moving on to i'rab, and specifically the flexibility of i'rab, meaning does the i'rab of this word show or not? And the reason why it's important for us to learn that is because when we come across a word in a sentence, we need to be able to figure out in what status that is, because if we can't do that, then we can't figure out if it's the doer or whatever. But some words in Arabic is not easy to figure out the i'rab because you can't see them. So we need to know the rules about all of these words and how we will see them in sentences, so that we can spot them and recognize them and we're aware of them. So in Arabic, you have a category of words called mu'rab, and this is split into 2. You have ghair munsarif, and then you have munsarif. So munsarif, these are words that get all 3 harkas, and they can also get tanween. Ghair munsarif, they're words that cannot get tanween. and cannot get a kasra either. And we're gonna look more into detail about this. And then you have words that are mabni in Arabic. So in English, the translation should be indeclinable words that basically they're not flexible. They look the same in all states. Their i'rab never changes. They never change. They always look the same at all times. For example, the word hada, it will always look the same. You're not gonna find hadi or something. It's always gonna look the same in all situations. So we're starting off with non-flexible words in Arabic. These words, they do not show any change in i'rab or status at all. You will not know what status they are unless you have a look at the context. Therefore, there is only one version of themselves because they always look the same. In Arabic, there are originally three mabni words. So these are not isms. They're words in Arabic that are mabni by origin. So these are your amar hadir. So this is your imperative verbs or your madi verbs. These are your past tense verbs or your huruf. These, they never change under any circumstances. And then there are some ism, because ism by default is meant to show all the harakats, is meant to show the i'rab, is meant to change. But these particular ism, they act like these original indeclinable words in Arabic, which the grammarians, they call them mabni asl. So these ism, they like to act like those, and so we call them mabni as well. And there are 8. So I'm going to list the categories. We don't need to know necessarily what they are for now. So number 1 is damir. These are your pronouns. Then you have your ismul ishara. These are your indicative words, words like this and that. Then you have your ism mawsul. These are words like alladhi, the one which, for example. Then you have asma'i af'al. These are isms that have the meaning of a verb. Then you have your asma'i aswat. These are sounds, words that indicate sounds in Arabic. Then you have your murakkab bina'iyun. These are your numbers in Arabic. And then you have your zuruf, which is the plural for zarf. These are your adverbs in Arabic. And then you have asma'ul kinayat. These are the nouns of allusion when they allude to something. So for example, how much? That would be an ism kinaya. Okay, so the rule for this, it's not really a rule, but essentially non-flexible words in Arabic, they look the same absolutely at all times. So for example, the word hada in halat al-nasab is going to look like hada, is going to look the same halat al-rafa and jar as well. Fully flexible words in Arabic, instead, these are words that can take all three harakas and they can take tanween as well, which means that they can be heavy or light. And most isms in Arabic, they are fully flexible. So for example, muslimun, which you can write it as muslimun, musliman, muslimin. So it can take all kinds of harakas and it can take tanween as well. So they essentially have three versions of themselves. But there is one note, very technical, to add here, that the i'rab can be hidden or apparent, but these words can still be considered munsarif. So I'll give one example. So these are your ismi manqus, words like al-madi or al-qadi. Basically, they have a kasra, and then after they have one ya. So these words, when they have alif lam, and when they don't have alif lam, they are written a bit different. So in halat al-rafa, when it has alif lam, for example, the word al-qadi would be like, you'd say it and write it as al-qadi. In halat al-nasab, it will be al-qadiya. And in halat al-jar, it will be al-qadi. So you see that in halat al-rafa and jar, these words actually look the same. So you might be tempted to say, oh well, then this word, it's not fully flexible because it doesn't take all three harkas. But in theory, it does, because we say that the i'rab of these words is hidden, which is why we still consider them to be munsarif. And when it doesn't have alif lam, in halat rafa is written as qadin, in halat nasab is written as qadiyan, and in halat jar is written as qadin again. So that was a note that I wanted to share. And then we come to the partly flexible words, which is the harder one. So by default, every word in Arabic really has to be heavy. They can take all three kinds of harkas. So when a word can't do that, then it means that it is a bit special. So partly flexible words, which are called ghair munsarif in Arabic. These words, they cannot take kasra and they cannot take tanween, except in a specific circumstance, which I'll mention later. Now, this means that all these words are light. The ghair munsarif words are light because they can't take tanween. So, example of that is Yusuf. So the word Yusuf in halat rafa is Yusufu, and in halat nasab is Yusufa, as it should be, and in halat jar it is also Yusufa. It doesn't get a kasra, it can't get a kasra, and neither can it get a tanween. So essentially they have two versions of themselves. We have seen the non-flexible words, they have only one version of themselves. They look the same in all halat. Then fully flexible words, they have three versions of themselves, whereas partly flexible words, they have two versions of themselves. And there are 9 reasons for a word to be partly flexible. And if they have 2 or more reasons, so if a word has 2 out of the 9 reasons or more, then we can consider them to be partly flexible, and we can say that they cannot take kasra and they cannot take tanween. However, some of these reasons, they are equivalent to 2, meaning that one reason it can basically count as 2. And the i'rab of these words is as follows in the respective status. So you have, for example, let's use the word Makkah. Okay, Makkah is غير munsarif. So you have Makkatu. Makkata is written a bit wrong. And in halat jar is also going to be Makkata. Okay, let's look at the reason as to why a word can be غير munsarif. And then afterwards, we're going to summarize all of this together, and I'll give a very simple way of thinking about this concept, so it'll be even easier, inshallah ta'ala. The first reason is adlun, and this literally means change. A word that changes from its original into something else. An example of that is the word thulathu. So the original of this word was thalathatun, and then with time, people obviously they changed the word and they shortened it, and they probably made it easier to say for the Arabs. And this is something that does happen in English as well. They just, over time, they just end up shortening the words so that it's easy to pronounce. For example, the phrase are you all right? Now people just say, oh, you're right. They have skipped some words, and it kind of sounds like another sentence, like you right, but it actually is saying, are you okay? Are you all right? And the second reason is wasfun. This is description. So when a word is originally used in the meaning of a description, okay, it could be that this word doesn't mean a description anymore, isn't used to describe things anymore, but originally it is used as a description, or it is still used as a description. So for example, the word ahmaru. Remember, it's not. Remember, you have to have 2 reasons, or more out of the 9. So a word can't just have adlun and then that's it. It's partly flexible. It has to have 2 reasons. Okay. So wasfun is one reason, and an example of that is ahmaru. The second reason of ahmaru for being partly flexible, if you're curious, that and is the fact that it's wazn fa'al, which we'll come have a look at that later. The third reason is ma'rifa, which means proper noun, or you can also say alamun. Both terms are valid, and this is the proper name of a person, the proper name of a person or a place or something else that's special and unique. So for example, the word Mecca, that's the proper name, that's غير منصرف. You have the word Misru, which is Egypt. You even have the word Fatima, all of that. So we have covered adlun, which is when a word changes from the original to something else. We have wasfun, which is a description. We have alamun or ma'rifa. I prefer the word ma'rifa, which means proper name of a person or proper name of something anyway. Number 4 is ta'nith. Ta'nith is femininity, basically, words being feminine. So these are proper nouns that end in ta marbuta. So for example, Fatima, this is a feminine word and it's also a proper word, so it has two reasons and therefore it's غير منصرف. Or you also have proper nouns that are more than 3 letters. They're more than 3 letters. So for example, Zainab, and they're feminine. Proper nouns are more than 3 letters and they're feminine. So for example, the word Zainab. Or they are non-Arab proper nouns again, non-Arab proper names, and the middle letter is sakin. So for example, the word misru, it's غير منصرف because it is a proper name of a place and it is feminine, and even though it's 3 letters, the middle one is sakin, so according to the Arabs that is okay to make it partly flexible. So the i'rab for misru would be misru, misra, and misra. Then there are words that are feminine, which end in ya maqsura or alif mamduda, which is written with a hamza after. These two are signs of a word being feminine, and these two count as 2 reasons. So if a word is feminine because of these 2 signs, then that word, even if you don't find any other reason, that is okay. That one reason counts as 2. However, you need to be careful because alif maqsura and alif mamduda, they do not always make a word feminine. So for example, you have the word taqwa, it has a ya maqsura at the end, but this word isn't feminine because alif maqsura, alif mamduda, just because you see them, that doesn't mean that the word is always feminine. It doesn't always apply and it doesn't always work. And then number 5, you have rujma. Rujma is non-Arab, basically, a word that is foreign to the Arabic language and it has been brought into the language. So that would be things like bibzi, Pepsi, practically, because it's not an Arab word. They just brought it into the language. So non-Arab words that are proper. Non-Arab words that are proper with 3 plus letters, not 3 letters, but with 3. Or you have 3 letters, but they're all mutaharrik, meaning that there is no sakin. For example, the word shatura. Shatura is the name of a fortress. However, if it is 3 letters and the middle one is sakin, then it is not considered partly flexible. For example, Nuh. Okay, because Nuh is the name of a non-Arab person, but because it's a sakin in the middle, then we do not consider it partly flexible, which is unique because when it comes to ta'nith and it has a sakin in the middle, that counts. But when it comes to rujma, non-Arab proper names, that doesn't count. Okay, so you need to make that distinction. And in fact, there are only 4 Arab prophets in the Quran, and I'm gonna write it here. 4 Arab prophets. These are Prophet Muhammad, Salih, Hud, and Shu'aib alayhi salam. Okay, and the rest of the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran are Ghair Mosaic, which means that if you ever find the name of a prophet beside these 4, then they are definitely going to be Ghair Mosaic, unless it is three word. It is a 3-letter name, and the middle one is Sakin. So you have Nuh and Lut. I think there's only these 2, and the rest of the names will be Ghair Mosaic. So this is a little bit of a trick, that if you come across any name of the prophet in the Quran besides these 4, in addition to these 2, then they're all going to be Ghair Munsarif. Okay, then let's look at the 6th reason, which is Tarkib. So Tarkib is a compound, a name that is a compound, a combination of 2 words. It's a combination of 2 words that is proper. The reason why we say that the combination 2 words has to be proper is because, as I have mentioned, you need 2 reasons for that word to be partly flexible and proper. Ma'rifa is the 2nd reason. So tarkib is one reason and alam is the other reason. So for example, you have the word Ba'la Bakka, which is the name of a place, which was in reality 2 separate words, and they just combined them and joined them into one. Number 7, you have alif and noon, the letter noon, zaidatan, meaning they are extra. They are extra added in the word. And usually you find these at the end of a proper noun, at the end of a proper name. So if you have an extra alif and a noon at the end of a proper name, then that is going to be partly flexible. So for example, the word Nu'man. This is alif and noon that are extra. So in the word shaitan, for example, you have the alif and the noon, but this alif and noon, they're not extra to the word shaitan, because the root words of shaitan is shayatana. So as you can see, this noon isn't extra. So because of that, shaitan, the word shaitan is fully flexible. Actually, it's not partly flexible, but Nu'man is partly flexible because the alif and noon are extra. And then you can also have alif and noon at the end of a sifa whose feminine is not on the scale of fa'lanatun. So you find alif and noon at the end of a sifa on the scale of fa'lanun. Yeah, these guys have alif and noon extra, but the feminine is not fa'lanatun. Okay, you can't make the feminine of these words adding a ta marbuta at the end. I don't know why, but that is the case. So an example of that is sukranu. So the word sukranu is ghair munsarif because it is a sifa, it is a description, and it has alif and noon that are extra at the end. And the feminine of this version is sukara, so it's not sukranatun, it's sukara. So that is ghair munsarif. Number 8 is waznul fi'li, which I have mentioned somewhere at the beginning. So this is the scale of a verb. Okay, this is when a sifa or a proper noun, it's on the scale of a verb. So sifa or proper noun is on the scale of a verb. So for example, the word ahmadu or the word ahmaru they're on the scale of أفعل, which is the مضارع صيغة for I did. And number 9, the ninth and last reason that a word could possibly be غير منصرف for is جمع منتهى الجموع. I'll just say جمعون, which means that this word is plural, and this kind of plural is a plural that has alif. It's a broken plural with an alif in it. So for example, you have words like masajid or mafatih. These are غير منصرف because they are broken plural, and this reason counts as 2. However, the exception is that if the jama is a broken plural but it ends with ta, then it is not غير منصرف. So you have the word asatizatun, which is the plural of ustad. This is not غير منصرف even though it is a broken plural that has an extra alif in it, because it has the ta, and therefore we do not consider it to be partly flexible. Another example of a broken plural that has an alif is, for example, masabih. And you also have akabir, which is the plural of kabirun, which means big. And the last note is that if any of these partly flexible words are mudaf, or they have an alif lam on it, and they're in the state of jar, then they can get kasra. So an example of that is if I say fil masajidi. I have given you the example before that the word masajid is partly flexible, but because it comes before huruf al-jar, I will give it a kasra. But partly flexible words, they can't usually get a kasra, but if you put an alif lam on them, they can get a kasra. Obviously, not all very Muslim words you can put an alif lam. You can't put an alif lam on a proper noun, for example. You can't say al-Musa. That wouldn't work. But on the words that you can, or when you make that word mudaf, and it is in halat jar, then you can give it a kasra. You can take a kasra. But even still, it can never take a tanween. And this is the end for today. Tomorrow we're gonna be doing a recap of all of this section, and we'll just summarize this. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.